Welcome to another video from Gweilo 60. It is June 1st, 2021 and Children's Day here in mainland China. And you want to talk about genocide. Everybody's on my case to talk about genocide. So today, as a Canadian citizen and somebody that lives in mainland China, I am going to talk exactly about genocide, about cultural genocide, about killing off minorities, about all of those bad things that everybody wanted to hear about. So here it comes. You asked for it. Anybody that reads the news, either in China or around the world, in Canada, it doesn't really matter, has heard of genocide in Xinjiang against the Uyghur people. And if it's even a minute chance that this happened, what are they going to do? They're going to boycott cotton. They're going to boycott, well, even the fishing, what is it, Dalian Fishing Company, Chinese company. Well, there might be forced labor on there, so the United States has banned all imports of their particular tuna to the United States, just because it might happen, forced labor or, any of these things. But let's get back to the genocide. Where's the uproar in Canada, guys? 215 Native Canadian children in a Indian residential school were found buried on the school grounds. Okay, now let me back this up about 200 years. You got all of these religious fanatics, preachers and people from the Anglican Church, the Catholic Church, Protestants, whatever you want, coming in thinking that they can save everybody's ass. Yes, and if you're not saved, you're going to hell, boy. And that's the way she goes. So they come in and they take those heathen Indians and they try to educate their asses. Yes, because the way they've been living for thousands of years is just not good enough. All right, I can understand that. Boys and girls need education. So now you fast forward to about the 1880s, and the Canadian government says, what was their motto back in these days? And it went from the 1880s up to 1996 when the Gordon Indian Residential School in my home province in Canada was shut down by Stephen Harper. 1996, that's 25 years ago. Think about that. That's only 7 years before I came to China and met Wei Fong. Anyway, I digress. Wei Fong. Anyway, I digress. So in the 1880s, up until 1996, well, probably to about 62, 66, somewhere in there, the motto of these residential schools was, kill the Indian in the child. Let me say that again. Kill the Indian in the child. They went into areas where the natives were in northern Saskatchewan, northern Alberta, southern Manitoba, Ontario, Quebec, BC, all across the country, except for a couple provinces. I think it was either Newfoundland, New Brunswick, or I think Prince Edward Island. I'm not quite sure, but there's two of those smaller places on the East Coast that there was no residential schools. Kudos to you guys. But I think back in those days, Micmac Indians come to mind where they just slaughtered them. Anyway, I digress once again. So, cultural genocide. These children were taken away from their families to kill the Indian in the child. They were made not to speak their mother tongue, either Cree, Dene, or Dakota Sioux in Saskatchewan, where I actually come from. I remember as a child the residential school in Prince Albert, Saskatchewan. I remember the Indian kids that went to those schools and how they seemed so poor, out of place, away from their families, had to live there 365 days a year. It looked freaking sad to me, you know what I mean? And I remember those days. So during their time in these residential schools, they were abused. Physically, sexually abused. Their culture was stolen from them. They weren't allowed to speak their own language. They lost all touch with their families and their culture, everything. They were adopted out to white families because white families could teach them better how to become white Christian children. And you see, and that's the ticket, guys and girls. These freaking residential schools were run by the Catholic Church, Christian churches. Who knows better than the Christians how to take care of these poor heathen children? You know what I mean? You know what I mean? Okay. So as this abuse started to come to light, sexual abuse. Oh, let me go back to this. In Kamloops, British Columbia, 215 children were found just this last week in a grave, and some as young as 3 years old. When they started bringing children into and you hear those, they're called suliao, cicado. They are loud, 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 and the summertime, you just can't get away from them. If you got a tree, you got one of them. So anyway, I just keep digressing. So the age group started out between 7 and 16 years old, and you had to go to the residential school, and this was mandated by Canadian law, and that's just the way it is. They scoop, and they called it the 60s scoop, but it started way before that. It got really big. I think in the 60s, 30% of all Native children in Canada were in residential schools, because they had to bring them from way far away. If the children lived in the city, they could go home at night, but they had to go to these schools. But if you lived far, far away in the bush, up in Buffalo Narrows or Fond du Lac or any of those places up north, they would just take you and stick you in these schools, and you might as well just say goodbye to your parents. 7 to 16 years old. Then they changed the rules, 6 to 15 years old, and that was the mandatory age that you had to go to school. In these graves in Kamloops, there was children as young as 3 years old. Okay, now think to yourself, why were there 3-year-old children there? The term father in the Catholic religion had a different meaning in these residential schools. I was around during this residential school time period, so I would imagine all of these preachers and nuns and all of these people that were abusing these children are still around, or a lot of them are still around. How come these ass lickers aren't in frickin' jail? How come the Canadian government can just apologize and it just goes away? You know what I mean? You're talking cultural genocide, you're talking genocide, you're talking genocide against children in a place like Canada. And the United States is not much different. They just went and slaughtered everybody. And this is known over the last couple of centuries, that the Indians in North America were basically taken off their land, put on reserves, and left to their own demise. You get into a place like Xinjiang, where I just was, and some of the videos are going to be coming out very shortly, but this one here, this one sort of pissed me off, as you can probably tell. A super rant video. In Xinjiang, they irrigate, they bring water from the mountains all the way into the valleys to irrigate and bring fresh water to the people, the minorities, the Uyghur people. Yes, well, and Han people, and Russian people, and Mongolia. I think they got 56 different ethnic groups there. But they bring the water in. In Canada, Indian reserves, a lot of them don't have fresh water. And there's a frickin' lake or a river. Northern Saskatchewan has 10,000 lakes or more. But they can't give these Indian reserves fresh water. Why not? Well, the government just doesn't give a rat's ass if these people have fresh water or not. It's another form of discrimination. It's another form of just cultural genocide. And then the Canadian government has the audacity, the parliament, to vote that China is committing genocide against the Uyghur population in China here. 260 votes to 0. One thing I have to say about the Liberal government, they didn't vote. They stayed away from it. That's probably the first smart thing they've done in a number of years. But O'Toole being the key part of that word, you get the Jagmeet Singhs of the world, you get the Green parties, and Bernier, well, I don't think he's even got a seat. But you see, these people, they can't look at themselves and say, oh, here, we did this, oh, we apologize. Well, apologies are just words. That's not going to fix nothing, guys. How do you actually fix it? Build infrastructure. build roads to these reserves. You see, these people are stuck out in the middle of frickin' nowhere. They have no chance of economic growth in these areas because they have no way to get, even if they had products, they have no way to get them to market. And no wonder these people are fucked up, and half of them end up, not half of them, but a good majority of the population of Canada in the prisons in Canada are native Canadians. And why? Because they've been brought up in such a shithole type of atmosphere, and they're considered second and third class citizens, and that's just the way it is. Lack of education, proper education on reserves. They have lack of economic growth on reserves, or in northern Saskatchewan or northern Alberta, or well, maybe not in northern Alberta so much because Fort Mac's up there. Oh, that's right, the Liberal government's shutting that shit down. Manitoba, places like that. So let's get back to the supposed genocide in Xinjiang province. I just spent 9 days in Xinjiang province, and actually autonomous region, sorry. And what I saw was economic growth, building of infrastructure. I even stayed at one of these hotels that was really, really nice. It was like what my grandmother would live in if she was a rich old lady, because it had that character type thing. And in the things that they said that they do for you for free is bring you a Quran, bring you a mat, and bring you a compass. So how is that discriminating against the Islamic people if this is common practice in hotels in that area of China? All of the rhetoric that you hear from the West, I think they're looking into the mirror and they're seeing what they used to be back in the day, and superimposing that on the Chinese people and using that against the Chinese people because they know that it made them look bad. So obviously it'll make the Chinese look bad. So as I was saying, about 30% in the 60s, the 60s scoop is what they called it, when it really, really took off and they were putting all those little Indian kids in those residential schools because they wanted to. They wanted to kill the Indian in the child. 30%, 150,000 children were moved into residential schools during this time period. Out of that 150,000 children, they figure between 3,200 and 6,000 of these children died in the custody of these religious organizations. Let's call it religious organizations because they weren't schools. They were places of abuse. They were places of sexual abuse. They were places to, you got it, kill the Indian and the child. All right. One of these institutions, these religious institutions, the mortality rate of the children in one of these institutions was 69%. 69%. You're talking genocide? That's genocide. Stealing children away from their parents because they're a visible minority. Taking them to a school and killing the Indian in that child. Not only killing the Indian in that child, but killing the child. And if you can't kill a child, take the child's heritage away. Take the child's language away. Take the child's parents, family, history, heritage, all of this shit away. And that's one way to kill the Indian and the child. Convert these children to Christianity and civilize them. That was their main goal. That's all they wanted to do to these poor little children. But they couldn't do that and then send them back to their parents. So what did they do? They adopted them out to white families. Damn, Canada's such a nice democratic country, isn't it? It has been in the past, and you know what? It's happening today with the visible minorities in Canada. You see the Asian hate. Now, you see the Jewish hate. Oh yeah, Jewish hate's back, guys. It's politically correct to hate Jews once again because what's going on in Israel and the West Bank. Oh, and it's always been, in North America, it's always been okay to discriminate against North American Indians. Exactly. Go figure. Democratic, first world country, and the States, as I say, the States is no better. So I ask you, where are these people today? Where are these children that were scooped up in the 60s? Well, and all through the 1900s and the late 1800s. But let's say the 60s, because these boys and girls are still alive today. Where are they? A lot of them are on Indian reserves. A lot of them have lost their culture. A lot of them are drug addicts and alcoholics because it's a way to cope. A lot of them have committed suicide. A lot of them have gotten over it and moved on with their lives and become leaders in the Native American and Native Canadian world because they found themselves again. So everybody, after all this is said and done, after the children were abused physically and sexually, after they were starved, after they in the wintertime in the prairies with little or no heat in these residential schools. So it was cold, it was uncomfortable, the food was terrible, the conditions were not very good. And then to be abused and then sexually abused on a large scale, guys. And this is not just in one place, this is all across the frickin' country. Who's being held responsible? Does an apology from the government suffice? Should these people be tracked down, these preachers and nuns and stuff that did this? Because it wasn't just the preachers or the ministers or the priests or you know what I mean? It was the nuns too that were physically and sexually abusive to these children. When are they going to be held accountable? When are people going to look at Canada and say, we're going to boycott your frickin' ass because you're the ones committing genocide? When are people going to be looking at the United States and saying, hey, guys, we're just not going to deal with you guys anymore economically because you're committing genocide too? You know what I mean? Why is everybody looking at China and saying, look at what these guys might be doing? Not doing. There's no proof of anything. And I spent a lot of time up there. I see the exact opposite. I see economic growth. I see roads. I see trains. I see new airports. I see people with smiles on their face. I see people that have, they see tomorrow as going to be better than what today is. I see all of these things in that area of China. I sure as hell don't see that in the Indian community in Canada, First Nations, whatever. I'm a boomer. I come from the 60s. This is the terminology that I use. But the thing is that when is this all going to change? When are these countries that are pointing their fingers at other countries going to start taking responsibility for their actions rather than imposing their bullshit ideals on other people and other countries, and other countries looking at what they've done in the past and say, oh shit, no man, we don't want any part of that. So reality, people, the colonial masters are doing exactly what they're accusing the Chinese people of doing. They have done it in the past, and they're doing it now, and they will do it into the future. We have no doubt about that, because they think that they're right, everybody else is wrong. Do as I say, not as I do. I feel sorry for the children and the families of the children that had to go through these residential schools in Canada. An apology from the government is definitely not enough. People should be held responsible for exactly what they have done. There is no statute of limitations on rape. There is no statute of limitations on murder. There is no statute of limitations on doling out corporal punishment to children under the age of, you know what I mean. Maybe some of these bodies should be exhumed of the 3-year-olds, find out who daddy is, and have that piece of shit charged. You know what I mean? Like, all of this stuff that is just, I've got a bee that likes to land on my hand. All of this stuff should be dealt with through the criminal justice system in Canada, but you know what? They won't. Why not? Because it'll make them look bad in the eyes of the world. It's easier to try to make China look bad, and they don't want to look bad. So these people get a free ride. There's justice for you. There's the justice system in the Western world for you. If that happened in China, freaking heads would roll. Anyway, that's another real rant video from Gweilo 60. This this shit pisses me off. The whole world has gone crazy, and the crazies are running the place now, and they're getting away with murder and raping children. Anyway, that's another video from Gweilo 60. If you like this video or not, like, comment, subscribe. I'd like to see more comments on this one especially. I want to see what everybody thinks. Anyway, oh, and don't forget to put a couple bucks in the children's Patreon account. It's for a good cause. Thanks for watching. Peace out. Bye now. Go away, bug.